talking to the biggest names in pro wrestling. This is Busted Open. Here are your hosts, Dave LaGreca and Tommy Dreamer.
Billy Corgan, welcome to Busted Open. Thank you so much.
Happy to be back.
You have always been a friend to this show, and I appreciate coming in studio today. And listen, the NWA is something that all fans are excited about. I think that you and Dave Lagana have done a tremendous job. The web series, 10 Pounds of Gold, I think has been fantastic. The story of Storm has been absolutely fantastic and everything that he's been able to go through, but really looking forward, and it's perfect that Tommy Dreamer is the host today, because looking forward to what's going to be happening in Philly in March.
Well, yeah, I mean, we have Nick Aldis.
Yes.
He's the champion, and he's about to head to the UK. He's doing a lot of defenses. I think something like over 20 defenses in 60 days. So hopefully, we'll see how all that goes. So,
well, you've been clear that if he is the champion come March in Philly, because like you said, he has some title defenses that are taking place before the big match with Tommy.
Some good opponents coming up.
Good times. I'll take on anybody, dude. It was, January 18th. I already had wrestled 14 times, so I really don't feel that's a big accomplishment. We did 20 title defenses in 60 days. So, you wrestle all the time. You defend. You're a champion 24/7. He is a great representative of the NWA. I love Nick Aldis.
Uh,
I'm not sure Nick Aldis loves Tommy Dreamer.
No, I know.
The
biggest thing with him has always been his ego / he's always pushing those buttons. I remember like it was yesterday, man. We were sitting in TNA, and they were on the fence with him. And I actually had those meetings were brutal before television, and they were, we don't know about this kid. And it was me and Devon versus him and what's his name, Doug Williams. And I liked him. I always saw potential in him. And me and Devon went out there and we busted our butts for him. And I told him, hey, this is what they're saying about you. You're going to lose your job. The next day in the meeting, hey, this is someone we should really, really look after. And, it was also because me and Devon we had it was an explosion match. And then I went and told him, and then instead of saying like, thank you to us, it was like, well, they should have done that in the first place. And right then and there,
right.
I was just like, whoa,
sounds about right.
Okay, and so... Yeah. I agree with his promos that he was cutting for House of Hardcore. It's he is different. He has all the tools, but there's this. I don't even. He's very, very professional, but there's this always been a chip on his shoulder. I don't know if it's about authority or whatever. And at least he's walking the walk right now for you, and that's cool.
Yeah,
but I'm a different breed.
I sat in many a TNA meeting where Nick's name came up, and people in the company openly buried him. And you would say this guy's in his prime, both as a performer and as a talent, and it was always about his attitude. People didn't want to work with him. Me personally, never had an issue. I've been friends with his wife for years, so maybe that sort of changed the tenor of the dynamic with working with him. So when the opportunity came up for him to be involved with the NWA, we jumped at it because we think he's a top-tier talent. And if we get to this matchup of Tommy versus Nick, I think that's a marquee matchup, so we're very excited about that. But, he has to go out and defend, and there's a lot of things that can happen in a professional wrestling ring. We're all aware of that.
Talk about the chemistry that he has with his manager, Austin Idol.
It's interesting. Very similar kind of paths, if you look at it. Austin's a guy who, again, top-tier talent, really, a Hall of Fame level talent, very influential, one of the greatest promos ever. If you look at him, even when he was Iron Mike in the WWF, incredible look. Really, the matches with Lawler, incredible stuff. And that yet he would always run himself out of whatever town he was in, usually over money or his perception of how he was being taken by the office. So very similar dynamic. I think that the magnetism between Aldis and Idol it's almost like a mirror reflection. I think Idol very much sees himself in Aldis. I don't know if Aldis sees himself in Idol, because I think Aldis only sees Aldis in the mirror.
And really, I want to kind of emphasize on what you just said about Nick Aldis, because I remember even after, because this is all true, because I remember he was somebody that would come on our air. He would be a guest, and I remember after a TNA pay-per-view, he was at a restaurant, and I just went up to him and I said, hey, thank you so much for the time that you gave us on Busted Open. He was so aloof that evening. Like, he kind of just shooed me away. I was like, are you kidding me? This guy that, seems so good on the air, he really does have that attitude of a prima donna.
Hey, I go through this sometimes with, the myth of my own legend in rock and roll. People have called me a lot of names, but then at the same token, if I wasn't that guy, I wouldn't be where I was. So top tier talent should have a chip on their shoulder. The question is, can it be managed within the concerns and goals of the company? You guys were speaking before about Ronda Rousey. I mean, you could definitely see it at some point. There was tension there between Rousey and the UFC because Rousey her celebrity was outgrowing the mandates and the agendas of the UFC.
But also, too, we spoke to Sasha Banks last week, and Sasha had some words about, like, hey, I don't have anything nice to say, so I'm not going to say anything at all. You can see it already before she's even had a match in the WWE that there's tensions. I mean, for somebody that's in your position with the NWA, how do you kind of surf those emotions of what goes on backstage, the politics, the different type of characters that you have to deal with?
I want the best talent for the NWA. I want to regrow the NWA. I've been very open about that, and we're very grateful to work with Tommy, who's sitting right across. Our relationship goes back 20 years, so it's a great journey that we're on, even as friends. But besides that, to me, is it ultimately good for the business? You know what I mean? Talent should have chip on their shoulders. They should want to be champion. They should all be pushing forward. I think, I don't know Vince McMahon personally, but I look at the way Vince has run the WWF and WWE, and I think that's a good example. It's like, at the end of the day, does it serve the goals of the bigger company? And you have seen times in the history of the WWE where a talent will sort of outgrow the agenda of the WWE, and out the door they go.
Yep. Because
they get too big ahead and they think they're bigger than the company. And at the end of the day, what's good for the company is good for the talent, but it's not always the other way around.
For me, my slogan, no politics, no BS, just wrestling. Nick Aldis does it in the ring. I can deal with any type of talent. He hasn't, not once, caused me one problem behind the scenes. Now that I'm wrestling him, now that, that was also before he was NWA champion. Yes, we just did a tag match. Yes, he helped Joey put a cheese grater to my head and all sorts of lovely things. The dynamic between me and Billy works. When Billy presented this opportunity to me, I jumped on it, and when the whole thing, when NWA went down, the big part of ECW's heritage was throwing down that title. And when I had it, I was like, hey, man, it's a new time. It's a new era. And we welcomed it back. And right then there, I was kind of like the jumping start for, hey, it's accepted. This is a real deal. I know my friend. I know he's passionate about wrestling. He's as crazy about wrestling as I am, and he's putting his money, his time, his everything into it. So that's what it all started. And, if it was just from that moment that we would not do anything else, cool. But now that I have an opportunity, and honestly, this is the first time I've had more people text message me, DM me like, hey man, I hope you win this NWA title, because it means the world to me. But as a wrestling fan, it means something to everyone. Our companies are kind of different, because when he purchased it, he basically bought footage and a title.
Yeah.
I have my company on shows and no title, so now it works out perfect.
Well, you mentioned about that NWA title. We're going to get into that for sure, especially that older footage and what it means. But talk about November 18th when Tim Storm came to House of Hardcore and he brought that title with him, and he said that you're going to have a match. I mean, as a fan, as somebody who, was watching, Georgia Championship Wrestling, you were at the Meadowlands to see the NWA when they came to town. Talk about, bring us back to that moment, what that moment felt for you.
For me, it meant everything, because the wrestling fans accepted it. And it was, they were just starting to know who Tim Storm was. And it was just like, hey, man, anytime you want a shot at this. And it was like, cool. And then, of course, Magnus being, Nick Aldis being Nick Aldis, he comes in and kind of ruined a lovely little moment. But it's, he picked his spot. Cool. If I would have had to wrestle Tim Storm, I'll wrestle Tim Storm. If he's on this, where he's going to get a rematch, then it'll be Tommy Dreamer versus Tim Storm. If he wins the title in between, I don't care who I will wrestle at House of Hardcore, because me and Billy will work this out. It's gonna be good. It's good for wrestling, and anything that's good for wrestling, that belt means everything to me, because the man that made me believe my hero, Dusty Rhodes, that he used to wear that belt, and I used to watch him as a kid every single week try for that. My mentor, Terry Funk, he held that title for years.
Yep.
So that is my lineage where I could say, hey, I'm a piece of that history. And that title meant, and still what Billy's the best is holding it. Right now, Nick Aldis is one of the best. You look at him, he can do it in the ring. If this isn't about, oh, well, I like him or I like his wife. He's the champion because he is the best at what he can do. And I'm all for that. And that's why, again, nothing to do with our friendship, me and Billy, because if Billy was like, oh, well, I want to put the belt on Dave LaGreca, I'll be like, no, Dave LaGreca is a horrible wrestler. That's not happening.
Yeah.
That's what he wants to represent. Cool. And I'm sure if I beat him, then I will be a great representative. And this is the first time ever that I actually get to want to gain 10 pounds. That's what I really look forward to, everybody. That's the underlining thing.
Billy, talk about Tim Storm, because what you were able to do with those video packages, the 10 Pounds of Gold series, is that you really got the fan to know Tim Storm, because there's a lot of fans that didn't know Tim Storm at all, but not just about what he did in wrestling, but just him as a person, his career outside of wrestling. And you really tapped into that old school feel of getting to know somebody and getting that emotional involvement. Did you think that series, at least for Tim Storm and for you, was a success?
Yeah, I mean, we took a chance on getting behind Tim Storm. We very openly discussed the idea of just stripping all the titles, which we did for everything except the heavyweight belt, and just starting a new chapter, because there's been obviously a lot of years here where people have kind of scratched their heads on what is happening with the NWA. Does the NWA even still exist? The thing about Tim that really distinguishes him to me is his passion for the history legacy. When he talks about the NWA heavyweight belt and the men who've held it, much like listening to Tommy talk about his idols, you get that real sense of like what I connect with very deep and viscerally to why I love professional wrestling, and why as somebody who goes, and we all know this feeling, we go out in the normal world and we try to explain, what is with you in professional wrestling? Yeah. If you don't understand that passion, if you don't understand why grown men get weepy when you talk about a Dusty Rhodes, Tim represented to me that real passion, not as a fan, but as somebody who actually understands the legacy of what it meant to hold that belt. And trust me, when he lost it, and I was standing right there, I mean, there was real grief. It wasn't just like, oh, I lost a belt and, next chapter of my life. I mean, It was like you'd taken away the greatest thing that he had ever had in his life. And he would say, outside of my family, this is my greatest accomplishment, my mountaintop, to quote him. So I think all wrestling fans, if you're a true wrestling fan, understand what that belt means. So both restoring what that belt means in common culture, as opposed to just like, oh, it's something from the past, and then actively defending it, which again brings back in the legacy, which is fighting champions, men who truly represent professional wrestling on every level. A little less sports entertainment and a little bit more like brutality and physicality. That's sort of
competition. Yeah, credibility.
Can you walk the talk?
Yep.
And I think, as a fan of Dusty Rhodes, and luckily I got to meet Dusty a couple times. I mean, it's hard to explain to a 25-year-old what a man like Dusty means, because the way he held that belt. And it goes back to what Tommy said. It's not just the belt. It's not just the legacy. But it's like the men who hold it and what it means to them, and then how it translates out.
You're a champion. And, if you watch the Ric Flair thing, he was, a big part of being the champion. How are these other guys going to eat? How are these other guys, if I left to go somewhere else? He was, the main event. He was helping draw all that with people wanting to see him lose. That's a huge, I've been that in ECW, where I had the opportunity to go other places, and I'm like, I have to stay here because I know if I leave, this isn't going to be here. And it's a responsibility.
And it's really hard to, like you said, Billy, to have a younger fan kind of relate to that, because, the WWE, no disrespect to the WWE, but they kind of live in their own bubble. But there was a time, yes, like WWE loses a wrestler, within a month they find a replacement and the machine just keeps going. But there was a time where that top wrestler meant everything to that territory and everything to that company. And Billy, I'll ask you this, because really the NWA kind of was out of the picture for a good 25-year period. you bringing it back, you know, what have you felt from the fans? I know for myself, I'm excited. You have a fan built in already, no matter before you even had the first match or crowned your first champion or put your first video out there. I was a fan because those 3 letters mean so much to me. I mean, what has been the outcry from the fans to you?
Well, I expected in the beginning, I expected cynicism and a little bit of doubt. And so I think our first thing was just, can we get past that? Because it's like, oh, you know, is it going to be TNA all over again? Is it going to be another chapter in the sort of the sad legacy of the NWA going in the wrong direction? So I think the first thing was to establish some level of credibility. And when David Lagana and I really sat down and drilled down on it, we said, let's just start one small step at a time, which is why we got in behind Tim Storm and pushed. It was a big gamble. You know, it was a big gamble even for Tim to go to House of Hardcore. It was a big gamble to send Tim Storm to CZW. I mean, you could easily call that enemy territory.
Yep.
But again, what the NWA belt represents, it's bigger than the man. And there's something about that where it's like, it's hard to boo that belt.
Like I said, that's great. They say it's bigger than the man because of what it represents. Hurricane, he put it out on social media. If there's anyone where I want to be a fan and see Tommy Dreamer win that title, it's me. Cody Rhodes, he said, please win that NWA title. And I said, only if I get to wrestle you first. And he said, done. Stuff like that means everything. And, you know, so many wrestlers were like, dude, that's so cool. Billy Corgan, you know, gave you a title shot. It's almost like they're all believing. Yeah. And that's what it's supposed to be about. But because believing it, because it's real. Yeah. That part is real. You know, and for me, hey, this is going to be one of my main events. I'm using this to help draw fans to come and watch my show live or watch on Twitch, and that's a big deal. And then after that, hey, Billy, you're going to get this footage. Do what you want with it. That, you know, that's the exchange. That's it.
Definitely go to YouTube. Have to watch the 10 Pounds of Gold NWA series. You can subscribe on YouTube to the NWA channel, and I'm telling you right now, whether you like him or not, Nick Aldis with Austin Idol, those videos are tremendous. So you definitely want to take a look. And then, again, on March 24th at House of Hardcore in Philly, Tommy Dreamer, our own Tommy Dreamer, will try to capture that NWA championship.
Yep, and, you know, it's just, that's going to be on Twitch the night before. You know, there's going to be an NWA title shot in St. James, New York. I'm all for anything professional wrestling, you know, and it's good for both sides for what Billy's trying to do. I particularly laughed my ass off, and that's a lot of laughter on the Austin Idol Christmas present thing. Yes. And like when I first saw like Austin Idol, where the hell did he? I was a huge Austin Idol fan, probably one of the few people I've never met in professional wrestling, and you know, hopefully one day I will.
I actually was speaking with Austin Idol yesterday, and he very much wants to be at that show.
Really?
Yes.
Sweet.
He is determined to be at that
now
show.
I have to go for sure. By the way, Austin Idol looks fantastic. It's unbelievable.
He works out about 5-6 times a week.
He looks almost like he did back in the 80s. It's crazy how good Austin Idol looks.
I'm just marking out now that Austin Idol may be at a House of Hardcore show. That's phenomenal for me.
Yeah, Billy, any chance you can get me to meet Austin Idol?
I'd
be your best friend.
I think I can arrange that.
$10 for a photo.
Although I think he tries to charge me just for getting on the phone.
Sure. Sounds like a lot of wrestlers. We heard Enter Sandman on the way back from break. Gotta have some memories when it comes to Enter Sandman. I
thought Sandman was going to come in and cane me.
For me personally, if you ever want to see one of the happiest Tommy Dreamer moments, was ECW One Night Stand 2005. I had wrote that entire show. We had so much going into it, and it was just after my music, and I stood at that, and they hit that music. I didn't even know it was going to happen, and it was just probably one of the most genuine smiles I ever had. And to me, this is what ECW should have been. And, you know, it was just like I had that closure that I really, really needed. And the fact that the show was kicking ass, and I just thank you, God. Like, I was just the most bliss I've ever been in.
Yeah, that definitely is a song. And I'm not a Yankee fan, so I know there was a closure for the Yankees that used to come out to that song. But when I hear that song, I instantly think of Sandman. I think of that entrance, and that was probably the one that you just mentioned, Tommy, may have been one of the greatest entrances ever. The way how hot that crowd was, the stare down with you guys and the Dudleys in the ring with the WWE, the corporate wrestlers up in that balcony. That was definitely one of the best moments of all time.
Yep. Billy, you got one?
Well, it reminds me, are we talking about songs or are we talking about Sandman's?
Sandman song. What a moment for you. Well,
I was involved with you guys at ECW at the Hammerstein Ballroom. I think it was 2000.
Mm-hmm.
And it was after the show. I went out in the street and it was kind of late and I was trying to catch a cab. And it took about 5 minutes for a cab to come up. And just as the cab came up, Sandman and his wife, I believe, walked out. And Sandman walked in front of me, not realizing that it was me.
Mm-hmm.
And so when the cab pulled up, the cab kind of did the thing like, well, who's taking this cab? And as Sandman went to go get in the cab, he turned his head and he realized it was me, and he froze for a second, and then he went and then just got in the cab and stole my cab.
That is tremendous. I was a huge Motorhead fan growing up, so when I heard them do that song, it's like, wow, this is amazing. Finally, that kind of crossover. So yeah, for sure. I think that's one of the best themes.
It's so recognizable.
Yeah.
It's time to play the game.
I'm going to go the other way here.
Okay.
When I first heard it, like the first time, I thought, it felt kind of like almost strangely not right to me. And
not flat, maybe, or
I don't know. It's sometimes, and I've been in this position. People ask you to write a song for a subject, like like for a commercial, or it's like about strawberries. It's like that's not necessarily how you write songs.
Okay,
writing to a subject, it's just not the way music generally tends to work. It comes out of inspiration. So when I first heard the song, I was like, I don't know if I really like it, and now I totally mark out for the song. So it shows you, even me as a music person, I got that wrong.
Now, were you a Motorhead fan?
Yeah, totally.
So when you heard it, you're like, all right, this isn't your typical Motorhead
That's
song.
what I'm saying. Yeah. As a Motorhead fan, and I started listening to Motorhead in 1984.
Okay.
I didn't quite get it as a Motorhead fan. You know what I mean?
Got it as a wrestling fan, though.
Over time, though, it got me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
And as those entrances became more elaborate.
So 1984 was the first Motorhead album you bought, No Remorse?
Well, I had a friend who had some money, so he used to get UK imports.
All right.
So he had gotten Ace of Spades, put them on the cover, standing in the sand dune or whatever. And listen, the first Motorhead song I ever heard in my life was Ace of Spades. I mean, come on.
That's one of the greatest songs of all time.
That's one of the greatest songs of all time.
Yeah.
So I used to see Lemmy. It's strange. I was around Lemmy probably 40 times, never met him.
Really?
Never met him. I was around him 40 times, never met him. But everybody that's friends of mine that was friends with Lemmy had the greatest things to say about him. So it's sad that I never met him. But I'm not a person who will go up and introduce myself because I know what it's like. You go out with Tommy Dreamer, you can barely get a word in, so the fans just keep coming.
Yeah.
Absolutely,
Tommy. That's okay that I asked.
I was gonna start reeling you back in.
I know you get pissed off, right?
Do you see
get angry.
The love that he starts having when he starts? He was probably wanting to sit on your lap as you were telling him those stories. But again, guys, we're on a
Uncle
wrestling.
Billy,
we're on a wrestling
Lemmy
show.
story.
We're talking wrestling. Sandman taking Billy Corgan's cab. Awesome! I love that.
Can we tell the Tommy Dreamer theme song story?
Well,
or you want to? Are you gonna? This is a professional radio. You want to drag it out?
Well, that's called a tease, Billy. Okay. We'll come back with that story. Tommy Dreamer going after that NWA championship in Philly. So definitely something that you want to be a part of, because history could be made, Tommy, on March 24th.
Absolutely. And you think about, it's a crazy, crazy time in WWE. You look at Bully Ray. Bully Ray is under contract with Ring of Honor, and yet he went and appeared in WWE.
Yep.
For me, I own my own wrestling company. If I win the NWA title, basically Billy Corgan will then be my boss. And we're having these crossovers again because we both love wrestling. But it's such a weird dynamic in professional wrestling. It's insane. It's the craziest business of all, and I love it. And, same with a guy who's been involved in rock and roll, has literally lived the rock and roll lifestyle. He's involved in wrestling, and he too will tell you how crazy, insane professional wrestling is, and he loves it just as much. I know things, about Billy in the sense of he also owns a lot. He purchased a lot of pictures from a famous photographer. Maybe he wants to talk about that. Just again, for his love of wrestling and then the opportunity to actually do this and have his own wrestling company. My hat's off to you. Well, and I'm not wearing a hat.
Well, you are a radio host now, so you can ask him those questions. You don't have to you can.
That's how it's done here.
You can actually ask the question. But before you do that, we heard "Man in the Box" coming back from the break. Got to have some stories about "Man in the Box."
For me, it ignites me. It's playing on a loop in my head 24/7. When I hear that music, I become him. I don't feel any pain, and I walk out through that curtain. Now I'm 20 pounds lighter when I hear that music. I have a fuller set of hair, and I will go out there and do incredible tasks because that music pumps me up like no other.
Billy?
Well, when did you go to the WWE? Like
2001 is when I went there, and then I was in the office around 2004, 2005.
So circa 2001, I got a call from one Tommy Dreamer. Listen, I'm trying to get "Man in the Box" from Alice in Chains to be my theme song in WWE, but there's some issues, and can you intervene? Do you know the guys in Alice in Chains? And I said, sure. Made the call. Got it all hooked up, and as bands do, they asked for a lot of money. Unfortunately, it didn't happen, and that's when Tommy got the fake "Man in the Box," the man in the
man in the rectangle,
the man in the plastic tub or something, whatever that. Yeah, I just asked him, what was the name of that theme song? He doesn't know, but there was a close call there where we almost were able to get Tommy "Man in the Box" for WWE, which would have been tremendous
huge.
Because I remember seeing I think it was Ford Field. When you were on WrestleMania there and you came out to the fake "Man in the Box" theme, and it's just not the same. You're coming out to 80,000 people at Ford Field.
And I understand it comes down to money, makes sense, but at the same time,
wasn't to the WWE's credit, it was a lot of money.
Okay.
And I get these asked too. You know what I mean? I get asked everything from independent films to my song "Bullet with Butterfly Wings" is this theme song for a new rock movie. And they pay a pretty penny for that stuff. So I get it. No disrespect to Alice in Chains; they have every right to ask for but it was a close call.
Absolutely. But you think of CM Punk, and when CM Punk had Cult of Personality, it really took that song to another level. It was back being on the charts. They played WrestleMania, so there is definitely a benefit to having that song.
Unfortunately, if the ask was today, I think the price would be a lot less because the market's really changed in regards.
Yes,
because people really want their songs on television now. But that was the early days of that, and so the price was prohibitive.
So the fake "Man in the Box" song doesn't pop in your head when you're walking down the street?
I actually, when promoters play, I was actually in Germany, and this guy keeps telling me about this is a real ECW crowd. I'm waiting for my music to hit. They hit this heel wrestler that I never met. He cuts this promo on me in German and English. They hit my music, and it's my WWE music, and I walk and I stop and I go, I'm not going out. And the promoter's like, what? And I go, I'm not going out. I go, how can you tell me it's my ECW, is such an ECW crowd, I'm about to have a hardcore type of match? And he's like, please go out. I'm only kidding. But I do inside when I hear "Man in the Box," they play it. I'm like, yes. When they go and play my WWE theme, I'm like, ugh. Yeah. Man, it's like "Man in the Pizza Box." It's National Pizza Day today.
Is it really?
Yeah, National Pizza. How do you not know this? National Pizza Day today. Come on.
As part of the purchase in the NWA, although I don't own the tape library, I actually control the Houston tape library.
Really?
So we've been in negotiations to figure out either where to put that library. The WWE remains interested in that library. There's some issues there with involving the ownership and money and stuff like that. But as it stands right now, I have access to that library, and so hopefully we'll be able to let fans see that library fairly soon. If it ends up on the WWE Network, I'm totally cool with that. We just have to find the right home for it, and that's out of respect to Mr. Bosch and his legacy with the NWA Houston. As far as who I trust in the business, I'm sitting across from one of those people. I mean, the fact that I've known Tommy as a friend for 20 years, that really, really helps. Another friend is Lou D'Angeli, who was signed Guy Dudley. He is the marketing director for Cirque du Soleil in Vegas. So Lou's expertise in marketing, Tommy's expertise in professional wrestling, and I have a couple friends in professional wrestling that go back, so I can make those calls behind the scenes. But for the most part, I'm really relying on my entertainment background. One of the things I think that's been really hard to translate to wrestling fans, and I'll keep this short because it can get a little bit boring. Wrestling is about to enter another golden age.
Yes.
And I think we all feel that as fans. So as much as we want to honor the past, as much as we love our heroes, and we should, the opportunities for professional wrestling going into this new media environment. And, you know, your show is a perfect example of that. 10 years ago, your show would have been a niche thing in a corner.
Yeah, late at night.
Yeah, your show has real influence and a real audience because they know this is where they can come for real information. And so as we see that opening up in the digital landscape, the opportunities for the NWA, the opportunities for the WWE, for Ring of Honor, if Sinclair gets bought, buys WG and all that stuff. I mean, these are tremendous opportunities. And then one more step on that. When you start looking at it, and though it's hard to imagine right now, I can see a scenario within 10 years where WWE talents will be working with other feds again. Other federations will openly work with each other because you're going to need that social media pop once or twice a year. And the opportunity for wrestling fans to see, you know, a Brock Lesnar against the champion of Ring of Honor. So, I mean, I think those opportunities, when they open up, I think everyone's going to explore that. And I think wrestling will go back to what it used to be, which is it's the Wild West. And it should be that way. That's ultimately the best for the fans.
I said it on the air with Bully Ray yesterday, Tommy. I feel like, not like the Monday Night Wars, everybody brings up the Attitude Era in that time period. This feels like 30 years ago. This feels like the mid-'80s with all the options and choices that you have. It's almost like those territory days where you had all these different shows that you can watch. And Billy, you're absolutely right. You know, when Doug Mortman and I started this show, it was once a week for an hour. Now we're on in the mornings, 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. Tommy Dreamer, Bully Ray, Mark Henry, you know, Jonathan Coachman are now a part of this show. And I give a credit a lot to people like you, Billy, that, you know, you took your mainstream appeal and now it brings credibility to a product that, as you know, doesn't always get a lot of credibility. And I do feel like a golden age of pro wrestling is about to start.
I'll go back to something that Jeff Jarrett said to me about 10 years ago, and it really holds true. Wrestling has never been, it's a double negative. Wrestling has never not been on television. If you think about it, from the earliest days of television, wrestling has been empirically involved in television. And as we enter this new golden age of television, you know, the Netflixes and the things of that, wrestling is going to have this incredible renaissance because wrestling fans can't be stopped. Trust me, I've sat in plenty of boardroom with some snobby LA guy who, you know, maybe he watched WWF when he was a kid, and he's kind of, well, okay, I'll have the meeting, but, you know, it's kind of beneath me to talk about wrestling. Trust me, wrestling does business. Wrestling is good business. And I think once wrestling climbs out of that last hole and is seen as a legitimate entertainment enterprise like motocross, X Games, you name it, movies. I mean, heck, The Rock is the biggest movie star in the world.
Yep.
That's not a mistake. Wrestling fans, and of course, Dwayne knows this, wrestling fans helped make him the biggest star in the world.
Absolutely.
Because wrestling fans' passion for their people is unmatched. I mean, literally unmatched. So that foundational thing, as it clicks into this new business, I mean, the future is so bright. And as much as we can look back and say, oh man, you know, Dusty in '84, I think if Dusty was sitting here right now, he would say, baby, what's coming is even bigger and brighter. And I think his son is a perfect example of somebody who sort of sees that future and wants to get there.
100%. He's the blueprint. You know, Cody is the one that took that chance, went outside the WWE. And listen, outside of the WWE, Tommy, you know this with House of Hardcore and all the people that were watching on Twitch, you know, the health of this business right now is everything that's going on outside of the WWE.
Yes. You know, I've said this before, 183 shows at 46 years old. For me, I'm happy that WWE keeps signing guys because guess what? I'll just keep on wrestling on the indies and doing my thing. Or a perfect example, tag team like the Young Bucks.
Yep. You
put them on your bill and like, oh, great. You know you're going to sell out. I did it in Australia with them. I'm going back to Australia. Billy, NWA title, whoever's your champion, hopefully it's Nick Aldis because he's on the tour. We'll have it defended there. I want the best for professional wrestling. That's kind of been my goal. That show that I had Tim Storm. I had the NWA with Tim Storm. I had Tommy Dreamer's House of Hardcore. I had guys from Impact Wrestling, and then I got jumped by the Ring of Honor Briscoe brothers. And there was not one problem of, oh, well, my guy can't do this or my guy. You know why? Because it was best for the fans. And if it's great for the fans, it's great for business across the board.
I hear this song, Tommy. I mean, another one bites the dust. Meadowlands, 1984, Piper's Pit, supposed to be the Junkyard Dog as the guest. He had a match with Paul Orndorff earlier on in the night. So Salvatore Bellomo comes out in his place. I mean, Roddy Piper just completely destroys Salvatore Bellomo and the entire Italian race. And then out comes another one, bites the dust. The music hits. Out comes the Junkyard Dog and clears house. Great moment with this song.
I unfortunately never saw the JYD wrestle in person. We did have him in ECW in Georgia, but we didn't come out to that theme song. But just, the chains and just him grabbing the ropes. And, for the fans that don't know, he made the power slam, that Braun Strowman's using.
Yep.
The big thump was beyond over. And, selling out the Superdome where WrestleMania is on just basically him. Think about if this show was going on, how back then it was just like, it was Junkyard Dog selling out the Superdome. It's that simple. That's how popular he was. Billy, got anything?
You got a Junkyard Dog? You got a Junkyard Dog memory?
Was a fan, but I don't have any specific memories.
Okay.
I do have
Chicago. Our TV thing was kind of weird because sometimes there'd be stuff on for a while, then it would go away, and so we didn't get a lot of him up there.
If you watch on the WWE Network, I have him. He wasn't, now going back watch, he wasn't the best professional wrestler, and I do have on my phone where he hits the big thump, gets off the guy, and the referee on one, and the referee still counts a 3. He literally was standing, and Mr. Olympia then just dropped an elbow on the guy, and it was just like, what am I watching? Like, I thought this was the greatest thing ever. It was horrible. But you talk about, like, Chicago being a weird kind of like Twilight Zone for wrestling. I spoke about it before. You had purchased pictures from a famous photographer. Can you tell our Busted Open?
Yeah, quick story. So the promoter when I grew up was Bob Luce. And he was always the guy on television on a Saturday morning hyping the International Amphitheater. And because I bought Mr. Luce's archives, I know this. I think at one point they sold out 134 international amphitheaters in a row, and I think the capacity was 14,000. So you can imagine. Wow. And that was the Putski was a big draw with the Polish audience, very ethnically driven, kind of like New York was back in the day. But so I bought Mr. Luce's wrestling archive, and from 1955 to 1961, Mr. Luce shot what was ultimately the territory owned by Vern Gagne and Dick the Bruiser. But Mr. Luce was sort of the front man for their co-ownership, and long story there. But anyway, so I have pictures of the Sheik when he's like 22. I have Dick the Bruiser when he's like 25. I have the Crusher when he's like 20. I mean, I have these incredible photos that no one's ever seen. 9,000 negatives.
That's amazing.
So we're still figuring out a way to sort of share these with fans. Haven't found the right avenue. But as we're building up the NWA, at some point, maybe that'll become part of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and Chicago has that, deep, rich tradition in pro wrestling for sure.
During the Super Bowl, there was, hashtag Super Bowl, and I just clicked on the hashtag, and it was Vern Gagne wrestling Ox Baker, and it was called in Chicago, and it was called the first ever wrestling Super Bowl. And it was like 1972 or 73, and I never knew that there was a show called the Wrestling Super Bowl. And I sat back and I watched during the Super Bowl. I just, kind of went to my phone for a little bit and watched 9 minutes of Ox Baker and Vern Gagne. And he took 2 hard punches, by the way, and still survived. He did not have a heart attack and lived, and he beat him.
And a few days before that big match between Muhammad Ali and Antonio Inoki, Muhammad Ali did a match in Chicago. Vern Gagne was the referee. I can't remember who it was against.
I actually have behind the scenes photos of that.
Really?
Of that setup, because I think they did a press thing. So I've got pictures of Inoki and Gagne in Chicago doing some sort of promotional thing.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
That's
I mean,
crazy
stuff I've got in this archive.
It's like goosebumps. It's amazing when you talk about certain eras of pro wrestling as a fan, you actually get goosebumps.
The difficulty, and rather than just release the photos, the difficulty is, and I think this is our job, collectively, is we've got to introduce young fans to the past in a way that gets them interested, and not just sort of talk about it in these glowing terms. We have to sort of explain contextually, just like I did with rock and roll. Here's where the business came from, and here's why this is important.
You know, Billy, people who are listening to this show right now that maybe didn't know about this resurgence and what you've been doing with the NWA, I mentioned the 10 Pounds of Gold series on YouTube. What's the best way that fans could interact with this new product that you're throwing out there?
Honestly, just subscribe to our YouTube channel. We just started our podcast channel as well. And just follow our social media. We're at NWA on Instagram. Pretty simple. And I think if you just follow along, I think you'll get caught up in the narrative. A lot of people have. And the reaction to fans has been incredible. I mean, I know wrestling is a lot of hype, but I've been surprised by how positive the reaction's been, because I think it's that legacy of the NWA. As long as you're being respectful to the history of the NWA and people see it moving forward, that enthusiasm comes right back.
And you've done a great job too. That 2-minute video that was up that you were talking about with Tommy Dreamer getting this shot, I think, you know, as a fan watching that and the story that you're telling, I think will get people excited as well.
Yeah, we hope, you know. At the end of the day, look, the fans will tell you whether or not you're going in the right direction. So far, it seems we're going in the right direction.
And, you know, again, for everyone that's listening, Billy's not doing this because it's, you know, hey, this is a business move for him. That's kind of secondary. Same like with me. This is because we love it and we want to offer an alternative. So that's kind of why he's doing it. He's a fan. I'm a fan. So we're just like you, and keep on supporting professional wrestling because we love it.
Well, will there be a chance of like a standalone NWA show anytime soon?
Yes. There's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of stuff I can't talk about. Yeah, there's some real